Welcome to another episode of Connect for Health, brought to you by Cigna Healthcare. Now, each month, we're bringing you big ideas for better living with inspiring guests, real stories, and expert advice. I'm your host, Scott Armstrong. I'm the founder of Mental, a platform that tackles the stigma of mental health and encourages well-being. And I'm joined once again by my fantastic co-host, Maysa Al-Kafaji, the head of government affairs and strategic communications at Cigna Healthcare.
Oh, thank you, Scott. Yes, it's always great to be here. The series is designed specifically for our Cigna Healthcare community, where we explore how small shifts in mindset, behavior, and lifestyle can really support big gains in your overall health and well-being.
Perfectly said. Now, today's episode is something that's very close to all of our hearts here in the studio. Kindness, the blueprint for raising resilient kids. Now, we're diving in today to how we can build a foundation for our children to build empathy and help them grow into confident, emotionally strong individuals ready to take on life's challenges at every single stage. Oh, I wish we had this conversation years ago for myself.
Yeah.
Now, as Maysa says, this session's streaming exclusively live for Cigna Healthcare members. You'll be able to take part in live polls. We want to hear your perspective and also post your questions in the Q&A. We'll come to that later. Maysa can answer some questions about coverage, and with our guests, we'll dive into your questions and what you want to know. If you're watching later on our YouTube channels or our podcast channels, please reach out to Cigna Healthcare. You're very welcome to join and be part of the live conversation next time. So let's get into this. We're really pleased to welcome our guest today, Christine Kritzas, who is a psychologist and director of parenting and family services at the Lighthouse Arabia. She's got over 15 years of experience. She's worked extensively with children, parents, educators, and corporations to strengthen emotional well-being at every level. She's also the creator of Smart Heart, which is an edutainment platform, that's not easy to say, that's helping raise a generation of emotionally intelligent children. Christine, welcome to Connect for Health.
Thank you, Scott. So lovely to be here.
Now, both of us are parents. Maysa, I want you to kick us off this week.
I am super excited about this session. Thank you so much, Christine, for being here. Okay, where do we begin? Let's start with the overall picture and why you're here today. Let's backtrack. We're talking about resilience and resilient kids. Could you perhaps start by defining what that looks like?
So resilience, in essence, is one's ability to bounce back from adverse situations. And if we look at resilience and kindness and the overlap or the correlation between the two, what we see is that kindness strengthens our relationships with others.
Right.
And having deep, meaningful relationships in life is not only a predictor of happiness, according to research, but it is also the breeding ground for raising resilient kids.
Kindness is something that I feel, even myself speaking from experience growing up over the years, has always been attributed to a sense of weakness and vulnerability. And it's really unfortunate because it's, like you said, it's the undercurrent. It's also quite formative in developing resilient children. But how can one really build on the importance and bring kindness to the surface when it comes to raising children?
So I think it is by large, firstly, what they see in their environment. And so if you want your children to be kind human beings, it starts with you. It starts with you being the one to live it, to embody it. And that question will come a bit later in the podcast again, but it really is about looking at what you're doing as a parent, because children don't do as you say, they do as you do.
Right.
That's kind of, that's one of those scary things, and it's the kind of the pressure of being a parent as well. And perhaps I'll speak for most parents as well. And I'm going to ask you this question, and I think it's a difficult one to answer, but what does that actually look like day to day? Because in this real life, we've come back, we've been working, we're dealing with the traffic that's getting increasingly, busy and busy on the roads, maybe the rent's going, there's all the adult pressures. So how do we actually live that and teach that kindness? How does that look like in the real world day to day?
So I would say let's look at 3 ways. I always like to speak in 3 ways or 5 ways, but let's look at 3 ways that we can build that in our families. And the first way would be through our modeling of it. And like I said, by you actually walking your talk. And that could be something as simple as you go to a restaurant, the waiter was very friendly, the food came out on time, you had a really special time with the family, and so you then tip the waiter extra than what you usually would, and you share with your kids why it is that I'm doing this. Looking at modeling gratitude to your kids as well would be another way, where you actually will go and say, this is what I appreciate about you, this is what I appreciate about what happened today, going and looking at that. And then also through storytelling. I think by watching films with children and co-viewing material together, you can then say, okay, what did you think about what she said to her parent? And what do you think about how he spoke to his friend? So having conversations afterwards about movies that you've watched or stories that you've read together can allow for parents to be modeling this on the day-to-day.
How early does that process start? That kind of modeling thing. How young are children when they start really picking up on these cues? Is it even as early as non-verbal?
Yes, it is through infancy already that children can pick up on these kind cues and these emotional cues. And it's through your facial expressions. It's through your tone of voice. And babies have what is known as neuroception. And neuroception is our nervous system's surveillance center, which indicates to a baby, it's a very unconscious process that happens. It indicates to a baby whether their environment feels safe or whether their environment feels like they're under threat. And so from a very young age, just through the tone of your voice, you can create a neuroception of safety for a child. And they need that safety to be able to receive kindness from you, to be able to engage with you, to be able to play with you. They need to be in that state of social engagement.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is. It's extremely fascinating. I want to go back to what you said about kindness and empathy, because I was thinking just from an anecdote perspective. I was having a conversation with my daughter, and what we do is we reflect on every night before she goes to bed. We have pillow talks. So we reflect on the day's events. And I think, Scott, earlier on, we were having this side discussion with regards to some of the dynamics in the class setting. I think our daughters are similar in age.
Yeah.
My daughter is 10. So, and there is, say, a certain, classmate of hers who's extremely, assertive.
Confident.
Bordering bullish. But I always try to step back and say, from an empathetic point of view, well, it sounds like maybe she was having a bad day, or maybe there was something that was going on in the backdrop that we don't know and we're not aware of. How do we kind of teach that empathy? It may be challenging for people who don't even have the ability to be as empathetic themselves, but how would you go about trying to ensure that that is practiced as a parent towards your child as well as yourself on the daily?
So I think, just going back to the friend in the class who is quite aggressive and a bit of a bully, I think it is important for you to take a step back and to ask your child, what do they think may be happening behind the scenes in that other child's life? Because bullies are often bullied. And so we want to take a step back and understand that this is not for us to take personally over here.
Yeah.
Because we often will take things personally. And I love the book, The 4 Agreements, where the one agreement is, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, be impeccable with your word, and always do your best. But that one about don't take things personally comes in very handy in situations like this where the child may feel like it's all about me and that child is being mean to me.
Yeah.
And when they can understand that that child may be going through a lot of things in their home environment and that behavior is learnt behavior.
Yeah.
And they are being bullied either by a sibling or by a parent or by another family member.
Yeah.
It kind of softens what it is that the child may be going through.
Yeah.
And I love pillow talks. I love the
Yes,
idea of pillow talks. I love the idea of having those conversations in the evening with your children. That really goes a long way because it's in a safe environment. The child feels like they can open up to you and they can share what it is that might be happening at school.
Yeah.
And to normalize it for the child, I think, and to validate your child's experiences is key, because as parents, we don't want to see our children suffer.
That's
we don't
true.
want to see our children go through any pain. And the first thing we will be inclined to say to the child is, don't worry, at least you have this, at least you have that friend to play with.
Yeah.
And in those moments, we are actually being quite dismissive of the child's experience. And so you want to take a step back. You want to leave the problem solving for the next day.
Right.
Because all your child needs in that moment is for you to actually hear them out, to validate their feelings, and to use their language. When we use a child's language, it is one of the most powerful shifts you will see in connection. Because I'm saying to you that I felt really weird when she looked at me that way in the classroom. Now, if you repeat that back to me and you say, what about what she did made you feel weird? You're immediately got my attention. You're immediately attuned to me. I can feel that you can feel me. And so when we use each other's language, and this isn't only for our children, this is for adults and for friendships and for your relationship with your spouse.
I feel like this is some kind of whisper a secret going on here right
There
now.
we go. There we go.
Yeah.
You should try it and then let me know how that goes, because
yeah.
I think when you use the other person's language, they immediately feel heard and understood. So that's what you want to do during your pillow talks with your kid, is to be able to reflect back to them what it is that they may be feeling, and standing in a position of curiosity rather than standing in a position of judgment and knowing when you are speaking with your child. Because when we stand in a position of judgment and knowing, we will come at the conversation saying, I know exactly how you feel. You know, I know exactly why she does those things. I had a friend like that at school and I did this and this. And then it becomes about you. And the child's like, no, that wasn't my experience. And they already shut down and out of the conversation.
Yeah.
But when you come at it from a place of curiosity, where you're hearing these words for the first time, you can say to the child, what does it look like when you feel weird? What does it look like when you feel excluded? What do you mean when you said that you felt like she was stealing the limelight? What did that look like? And so when you come at it from a place of humility, the conversation can go a lot deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before we kind of started the live conversation. You know, and sometimes I was reflecting on this morning. It's like, we have to remember that this isn't easy. You know, like my daughter's 9, she's 10 this year.
Yeah.
There's you know, when they're toddlers, there's less politics, everyone's kind of friends, and now they're beginning to grow into young human beings with all these thoughts and feelings and emotions that they've never had before.
Yeah.
You know, there's outside pressures from peer pressure or TV that they may have watched, and all of a sudden we're asking them to emotionally regulate and deal with these kind of politics. And you know, I'm 52 and I'm still struggling with it. So it's hard for children. How important is it for parents to take that step back and recognize and go, look, you know, we need to give you some space on this one?
Very important. And just like we put a lot of importance on getting our children into extra classes when it comes to extra maths, extra science, you know, getting them a football coach, you know, doing all of these things to help them grow on a cognitive level, on a physical level. We tend to forget about the emotional skills that they need to learn and they need to develop. And so I'm a strong advocate for therapy, not only because I am a therapist, but because I'm in my own therapy myself. And I think that it really helps to move the needle on your child's well-being when they have the skills to be able to navigate those difficult conversations and manage those big feelings. And so just like having a sports coach, they can have a life coach. They can have someone that they visit on a weekly basis who can give them the skills to be able to recognize when they're feeling a certain way, why they react in those situations, how they can respond in those situations. And so, getting them into their own therapy process, getting them into social skills groups, these are ways to foster that emotional intelligence.
I think there'd be I suppose there'd be a few parents out there that would say, life coach, isn't that my job? Isn't that my responsibility?
Yeah, it was really interesting because when you said that, I remembered a good few, I think it was about 2 years back, I was, it was actually an art therapy session, but somebody who was there was actually a children's life coach, and she was giving reference to the parent of the child. So she was engaging and the child was actually doing quite well. But here's my question to you. There was that dynamic that was working well, but then the parent themselves were really the ones that also needed that intervention, but that wasn't happening. So how would that work? Because I know it's almost like a triangulation, if you like. You would need to have the child, but the parent must also be willing to also be part of this, three-way approach, if you like.
100% Mesa.
Yeah.
I think you're just putting a plaster on the wound when the child is only in therapy, because we're only treating this one part of the larger system.
Yeah.
And something that I often use as a powerful analogy is the matryoshka doll.
Yes.
Those dolls. The tiny doll fits into a slightly bigger doll, and a bigger doll. And that tiny doll is the child that is in the therapy room with me. And the slightly bigger doll is the home environment and the parental relationships and the parental mental health and the sibling relationships. And then the slightly bigger doll is the school and the pressures at school and the pressures in, the peer pressures that they face. And then the slightly bigger doll is the community that they're in. And then there's a slightly bigger doll, which may be the Dubai doll, which is quite a doll, So it's really about understanding that it's the context that the child lives in. It's the soup that the child swims in that makes up where they are at right now. And if you are only treating the child, but you're not treating what is going on at home, you're doing the child a disservice, you're doing yourself a disservice as a therapist, you're wasting time and money when it comes to dealing with the issue at hand. And I think the best therapeutic outcomes are those where the whole system is involved, where the parents are coming in for regular feedback sessions, where you may even recommend that the parents get into their own therapy process themselves to better understand their childhood, their triggers, what may be coming up for them in their own relationship with themselves, because often that can fuel what it is that we're seeing with the children themselves. Right. So I often will say that, if I'm working with a child, I'm also working with the parents. Yeah. Okay. I don't only work with the child. It's just the condition I have if we're going to work together. I don't do a weekly visit where the child comes in for play therapy, but I'm only seeing the parents once every 6 weeks. I don't think that's going to help move the needle. Yeah.
That pretty much also, it leads on to what I was wanting to ask, because you worked with hundreds of families, but that's your approach as well, in order to, get to that point of working towards having resilient children, that you would need to do it in a collective environment where the families are pretty much all hands on deck, willing to also participate and be part of the journey.
100%. Yeah.
Right, guys, it's time for you to get involved. Mesa, one thing that has been bad for my mental health is watching your microphone cover slipping down and down.
Let me just move this back up.
I'm now going to launch our first poll. So in a moment, you'll see the questions come on your screen. With our new format with the podcast, you'll see the window in the top left-hand side. If you want to maximize that window, you'll see there are 4 little arrows. Maximize that window. You'll see the questions there nice and clear. When you've answered and submitted your vote, please press escape and you'll come back and you'll see us all again. So remembering as well that this is a feature that's available purely for our Cigna Healthcare members. And again, if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening via the podcast, reach out to Cigna Healthcare and be involved. So our first poll question is, what's the biggest challenge you face when teaching kindness at home? And the options being managing sibling conflict, lack of time or patience, digital distractions, that's a big one, unkind influences from outside, interesting answer, or not sure where to start. So please vote and we'll see what the results are. So hopefully you can see the questions now, and we'd love to see your votes coming in. Give us a second here. Okay, so we've got an early leader with unsure where to start. And I'm going to we'll give you a few more seconds to answer, and then we'll go to the results. So here we go. Hopefully you should be able to see the results as well. So an interesting set of results here.
Okay.
What do you think might be the biggest one out of that? So we've got managing sibling conflict, lack of time or patience, digital distractions, unkind influences, or not sure where to start.
Lack of time would be one, and the digital distractions.
She's absolutely nailed it. It's almost like she does this for a living. So top cause, lack of time or patience, followed by, actually it's an equal arm wrestle between digital distractions, and I think perhaps we should talk about that a little more, and unkind influences from outside, which I guess could also link back to digital distractions. And then the number 4 choice is managing simply conflict, and then not sure where to start is the last one. So digital distractions, that is a real... I mean, it's kind of like a growing issue for parents as to when you're dealing with families, what kind of advice are you giving? We've seen Australia now putting a social media ban in, no smartphones until 16, or no social media until 16 years old. Again, if we're looking at outside influences, those unkind influences, whether that be YouTube or early adoption of social media, what's your advice? I know I've got a personal opinion, but from the professional perspective.
I think I can share a lot of tips and strategies with parents, but at the end of the day, it comes back to your family values. And you're going to take what I'm saying, because I can share some facts with you around the dangers of screen usage and, what my suggestions would be around that. You're going to take what I'm saying and you're going to then fuse it with your family values. Yeah. And I think that's the best approach to take over here, because we often get a lot of information from a lot of different sources, but what works for me and my family at the end of the day is key. And for the parents listening today, I want to say, meet yourselves with compassion when it comes to what you're doing, because you're trying to do the best that you can with what you've got right now. And when you know better, you will do better. Yeah. But I will say that I think there are 3 things that parents can do to move the needle on screen usage in the home. And the first would be that they co-create boundaries around tech usage in the home with their children. That they have their children be involved in that process of us looking at what should be the boundaries that we set around tech usage in the home. So they're creating it with you. Yeah. And so that when you do enforce the boundary, you can say, well, you're the one that sat with me around the table and put this in place. Right. So we co-create it, and we look at the different ages and stages of the child, because what applies to my 3-year-old might not apply to my 16-year-old. Yeah. Okay. And so we co-create that. Then we co-view material with our kids. So you sit and you will watch shows with them. You will play those games on the PlayStation with them. Let them show you their world. Lean into their world a bit. Because if you keep saying, no, that's not good for you, and why are you doing that, and what is that you're busy watching, you lose your child in the process. And so parents are digital immigrants and kids are digital natives. Right? And so lean into their world, understand what they're doing, co-view with them. And then also looking at making time for those real-time connections, making time for you to do things as a family where there are no phones involved, where we are having a card games night, where we are playing together, that they will start doing more of what you do based off of your values.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow up because I think that's brilliant, but social media. Now, we're trying very, very hard to limit, I suppose control is possibly the wrong word, but, okay, so there's kids' YouTube and the amount of time they spend on the screens. Where do you think about, I had a conversation with an Oxford University professor who works with the Oxford University Wellbeing Unit, and they were saying even down to some things like in gaming, whether, if you're on a Nintendo, then your child's in a closed loop, as opposed to something like a Roblox where they're out and it's open to people commenting all the time. So what age is the right age, or your advice around that social media? Because they're not really supposed to be on there anyway, but how many kids are actually getting into that social, even if it's in messaging groups. We've had these, we managed to co-create the policy around being in messaging groups where it was very tight-knit, close, as opposed to a classroom group where we could see messages coming in and there was no control, and you were like, oh, this isn't great. So even that, just giving them access to that digital connectivity to outside of your family home, what's the advice around that?
That we need to be aware of super peers. As a kid, and I might be giving away my age here, but when I was a kid, back in the day, when I was a kid, my mom would say to me, I don't want you hanging out with that child because she's a bit big for her boots, and I'd prefer that she rather comes to our house if it is that you do want to have her over than you going to their house. I don't know what their family's like. I haven't met their parents. And so our parents were able to control our peer relationships in some way or another and pick out those peers that they felt had similar family values to ours. But nowadays, if your child has a smartphone and they are on social media, they have super peers. Super peers are the celebrities that your children follow. And are those super peers' values aligned with your family values? Probably not, a lot of the time. And so you actually have fewer controls in place when you give your child a smartphone. And I actually attended a conference in 2018 in LA, and one of the speakers was speaking about the relationship between confidence and smartphone usage, and how confidence declines in girls as they spend more time online. And she used a very powerful analogy. She said that, would you give your child keys to a car when they turn 18 years old and say, many happy miles, my darling, when you haven't taught them road etiquette, they haven't been for driving lessons, they don't have a driver's license, never mind a learner's license? You wouldn't. Why is it that we're so quick to give our children a smartphone, which can take you a lot further than a car will? It can take you right into the hands of predators online. Without having taught them netiquette, without having taught them about social pressures, without having had conversations around cyberbullying and normalizing cyberbullying for your kids. And so that analogy is something that I would want parents to keep in mind when you do give your children a smartphone, that it is done in a responsible way. I cannot tell you the age that you should give your child a phone. That is up to you. That is up to your values. But I can say to you that the more we delay it, the better. The more we build those social skills for the child, the better. And it is about normalizing cyberbullying and speaking about it in the home and educating children around what cyberbullying looks like and speaking to your kids when you have been faced with an incident of cyberbullying. And that can be just through WhatsApp groups and WhatsApp conversations that you might be having as an adult, where you have to navigate difficult conversations, where someone might single you out, where you may feel excluded. You need to speak about those instances and how you manage that online so that they can start learning the tools necessary and the phrases necessary. So you teach them default language around what to say and how to say it when they are faced by a bully, right? And them to also understand that there are a lot of keyboard warriors out there who are very brave to say things behind a screen but won't say it to your face.
Yeah.
And to that point, again, don't take it too personally.
We were talking before we came on live as well. I was listening to the podcast with the author of The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt. He was saying with his children now, he has this policy now, which is, and it's something we kind of forget, that we can still buy them in the age of the smartphone, that you might want to give your child a phone for connectivity, but just he has an analog phone, as opposed to because he said basically, even if you try and parent this and your kids are going to create multiple accounts, you're not going to be able to police all of that. So just don't give them that option, because they'll always find a way.
It's true, because I feel that a lot of parents will use, that reasoning that, I want to be able to reach out if they're on a play date. I want to make sure. But yes, analog phones, very simple, does the job. Likely to pick up the phone, respond, whatnot. But I wanted to just go back to what you were talking about, because we were really referring to the context of social media. And I want to go way back to the discussion about the whole kind of like digital sphere. And there was a terminology, and I was trying to think back to who said this, but it was really trying, if we want to leverage on aspects of empathy, of kindness, and how that will bring about resilient children, this sense of digital isolation, and I think the person referred to it as almost like digital autism, because they are in their own world, they're in their own sphere, and it's almost impenetrable when you're trying to really get to that child, but they have chosen seclusion and to be in that, I keep knocking my microphone, in that kind of like sphere. And it's hard to kind of coax them out, to bring them back into reality, to get them to want to engage with family, whether it's around the dinner table or whatever that looks like in your household. How as a parent would you be, other than maybe trying to cut back onto the time spent on their devices and on their screen time, how else can you try to bring them into the real world as opposed to that digital world in order for them to really develop into resilient children?
I would say that parents need to tolerate the discomfort of their children not liking them.
Okay.
And what I mean by this is that a lot of things that parents struggle with a lot of the time is their relationship with their child and how they want their child to like them, how they find it really difficult that they are the unpopular.
Guilty as charged. I just want to be the good cop all the time.
Yeah.
Parents don't like the idea of their child not liking them.
Right.
I think
Actually, one of our audience members has also posted a question. It really relates to this, so I'm going to continue with this. Arjun, thanks for your questions. Oh, by the way, everybody, thank you for the questions. We've got lots coming in. We will get to them. But Arjun was saying, I have a question for the group. How do you establish boundaries with your children while still parenting with kindness? So it is that kind of being the friend, but also being the figure of authority in some respects.
It's a big challenge for me.
I think because there's this idea that we need to be our children's best friend. But I also want to say that if you are your child's best friend, then they can also block you. They can leave you on read. They, don't have to respond to your texts.
Sounds like the rest of my friends, to be fair.
So this idea that I need to be my child's best friend can sometimes be taken in the wrong ways. I do believe that you need to have a friendly relationship, a loving relationship with your children where they can come and talk to you about anything, of course. That is key.
Yes.
But children need boundaries. The more boundaries there are in place, the more safe and secure a child feels. The more safe and secure a child feels, the more confident they actually are to go out into the world, to take risks, to make mistakes, to fail, to bounce back after difficult situations have unfolded, because they know that they're bouncing back from a safe base. That safe base is a base where there are boundaries, where I feel safe in my home. And boundaries are actually an act of compassion.
Interesting.
And hear me out. When we have boundaries in place, we are more clear about what flies in the home. When we are clear about what flies in the home and what our family values are, then we are also being kind. Because as we know, being kind and being clear, they come hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so when a child knows that these are the boundaries, these are the limits, and I will push them in this way and that way, but this will happen if I push them in this way and that way, they are going to be better equipped to go out into the world and do the things that they need to do. And in homes where there are not those boundaries in place, these kids actually grow up feeling more insecure than their counterparts.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is fascinating.
I'm just going to let that one soak in for a second. Again, and I'm without turning this into a personal therapy session, and I promise you we are getting some of your questions as well just in a couple of minutes. But, as parents as well, I came out of a very fear-driven childhood. I've been insecure and a people pleaser for a lot of my life, and finally hit 50 and made a few changes. But there is that fear of not passing that on to my daughter.
Yeah.
So how do I, sometimes I think I probably am too soft. I'm trying to protect her almost too much because I want to break the cycle of the childhood I had.
Yeah.
How do we, what's the balance between parenting and trying to break that cycle and being too soft?
Aye.
Be careful of the pendulum parenting that can happen where, because I was raised in a home which was fear-driven, I want to make sure that my child is raised in a home where there is no fear present at all. And we will then overcompensate in many ways. But that overcompensation isn't either very healthy. And so to go back to the drawing board and to ask yourself, am I parenting my child right now or am I reparenting my inner child right now? Because there is something that, I've come to know in my work with adults, and I would say that nobody leaves their childhood unscathed in some way or another. We all carry wounds to one degree or another. And I think it's important that we realize that there's no such thing as the perfect parent either. And that we need to go and work through our own wounds. We need to go and reparent our inner child, because it is through doing that then that we will not veer in the direction of pendulum parenting, because we will be giving ourselves what it is that we need, and we will still show up for our children, giving them what they need. Because your 9-year-old and your 10-year-old may come home from school and they may say to you, I wasn't invited to so-and-so's party. And you may fly off the handle and phone that parent and say, why did your daughter not invite my daughter to that party? That's bullying, that's exclusion. And your child is going, but mom, but dad, I don't mind. I actually wanted to go and do this on the weekend. And so that's where you see that your own agenda is playing out over here, and it's not your child's agenda. And so it's really important to get into your own therapy process as a parent to tease apart and understand what is my stuff and what is my child's stuff, and how does this stuff play out?
Right.
What's the dynamic between me and my child? Because my dynamic with my one child may look different to my dynamic with my other child.
Absolutely.
And why is that?
Yeah.
So it's time for you guys to get involved again. And then after this poll, we are then going to come to some of your questions, and we've had lots.
Wow.
So I am going to, again, the poll should be live now. Give it a couple of seconds. It'll arrive on your screens. Remember, maximize your screen so you can see the questions. And then once you've voted, press escape and you'll be back with us. And again, just that little reminder, just a plug. This is an exclusively live for Cigna Healthcare members. If you want to get involved, if you're watching on YouTube or you're following us on the podcast and you want to get involved in this conversation and post questions in the chat bot, please reach out to Cigna Healthcare to talk about membership. So let's have a look. Today's second poll is, how often do you talk to your children about emotions and empathy? Which is a really good question.
Yeah.
Daily, a few times a week, occasionally, rarely, Not yet, but I want to start. So we'll give you a couple of moments. I'm going to ask you that question, Mesa. How often do you talk to your kids about emotional and empathy?
Collectively, I only speak to one of them about it. I feel like I've lost the reins with the older two boys, but with my youngest, it's every night.
Has that changed over the years? Have you become more aware of the importance of this, or is this?
I think because I'm actually trying to apply it myself, and I try to remind it myself on the daily. With work colleagues, with my parents, with my my social network. So it's always something that I'm constantly reminding myself about and practicing. And obviously, I would want to impart that on my child. We're getting there. I mean, it's difficult because sometimes I feel that she'll have her own views on situations, and I don't want to drum in what I think is the right thing. I leave it fluid, and I just hear what she has to say when we're talking about how would she have responded or acted differently, in a scenario or something that took place that day at school. And it's usually to do with like their friends.
Yeah.
So you know what girls can be like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's an increasing at that age as well, 9.
Yeah.
What do you guys think? Well, let's see the results. They've just coming through. So the highest option here, a few times a week. So that's good. Well done there. Daily. Okay, so occasionally is so nearly half a few times a week.
Okay.
Occasionally is about a quarter. Daily is about 20%, 17%. So that's good. And rarely is only down there, or not yet, is only down there. So it's about less than 10%. So nearly 9 out of 10 parents who are tuning into this webinar are actually having this conversation. So that's really, really good. At least it's on the radar.
Yeah.
I know when I was growing up, it was kids were seen and not heard, and that's it. Right, I'm going to dive into some of your questions. You guys have been very patient, and thank you so much to all of you posting in. Let me pick out 1 or 2 here for you, particularly Christine. My child is very outspoken and questions the norm, and sometimes adults teachers might find it offensive. She should accept since an adult or authoritative figure is stating something. As a parent, we encourage our kids to question and be curious. How can we guide her when facing resistance from others? That's an interesting question, isn't it? Because we do want our kids to be confident, but then we also want... I was having a conversation the other day as well about the difference between raising compliant kids and raising confident kids. But how can we raise kids with confidence but also respect for rules and boundaries?
That's
so that's a really good question. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's a fine line.
It is.
And I think we need to look at our language. We need to look at the language around and the language around or. Because there's this idea that you're either raising assertive kids or kind kids. Why can't I raise kind and assertive kids?
You were talking about it before, one of the difference between using and versus or.
That's it.
Yeah.
So, looking at giving your children tools to be able to express themselves, to be assertive, to state their views, whilst also holding the value of respect in mind and holding the value of flexibility in mind. And the reason I say you need to be flexible is that you need to adjust your responses given your audience. And you got to know your audience as a child. You got to know who you're sitting in front of. You got to know who can tolerate more of your vulnerability, more of your authenticity. And not everybody deserves your vulnerability and your authenticity. And as a child, if you are expressing your views, that's a vulnerable thing to do.
Yeah.
It's an act of vulnerability. It's an act of courage. And so we do need to understand that there's also a value of discernment that we can teach our kids, that we need to be able to discern and judge if this is the right audience to hear you say what you need to say right now, or if this is a time where you need to be playing a game of chess here, and you need to think about, if I move here, that's going to happen. And if I say this, that's going to be the consequence.
Interesting.
So really going back to the values wheel, which is something that I actually would like to speak about, and I want to speak about it and share a tool with parents. And I don't know if I can share it now
Do
or
it now.
Oh,
That
yeah.
sounds like the
Please
perfect
do,
time.
yeah.
The values wheel.
the values wheel.
We're all ears.
Okay, it's when we think about values-driven parenting, and we think about rules-driven parenting is anchored in because I said so.
Yeah.
Go clean your
Right.
room because I said so.
Yeah.
Greet your grandmother because I said so. But children today want to know why.
Exactly.
And so I encourage parents to create a values wheel with your kids. Go to a stationery store, go and buy an A3 canvas, go and buy colored paints and pencils. Sit down with your children. Think about what your family's top 10 to 20 values are. Value of gratitude, generosity, kindness, courage, perseverance, trust, love, respect, balance, flexibility, and the list goes on. And you put these values in every spoke of the wheel. And you parent from a place where your child says to you, I want to play another round of PlayStation, and they've already had their hour. And you look at them and you say, you can't play another round of PlayStation because in our home we value balance. And you point to the values wheel and you say, you've had your 1 hour and tomorrow you'll have your next hour. Or if the child refuses to share the PlayStation with their sibling, you can say to them that you will be grounded for this. And the reason you'll be grounded for this is because in our home, we value generosity, we value turn-taking, we value sharing. Point to the values wheel. And by you not sharing the PlayStation with your sister, you are going against a family value. And for that reason, you will be grounded. And for that reason, you will not have the PlayStation for the next week or two. And you need to then stick to that. But as you are disciplining your child, you are anchoring it in a value. So your child then leaves the home one day with a default value system in place.
Can I ask a follow-up question? And I'm sorry I'm hogging this one, but I think it's just a fascinating question, particularly in this, this best friend era, this, whether it be reparenting. You mentioned discipline or punishment.
Yeah.
Like, how important a tool is that still? I mean, maybe discipline is the right way. When I was growing up,
did you feel
it was
uncomfortable
punishment.
when she said
Yes.
that?
Yeah, I kind of did.
Ooh,
Because I
punishment?
can't. I know the amount of times I've had the conversation that there might be consequences, but I can't think so far that there actually ever has been consequences. So how important is it for discipline? Because that feels like that's increasingly again that balance or that fine line where we actually pull the trigger on discipline.
Yeah. I think we're not after punishment here.
No.
I think we are after discipline over here because by having discipline in the home, you are teaching kids that their actions have consequences. And the big wide world, there are consequences for your actions. And so one day you won't have me saying to you, don't do this because that might happen. You might have a police officer saying to you, don't do this because this might happen. It may be too late then. And so we do want to explain to children the relationship between cause and effect. And the easiest way to do that is to say that, in our home, we value X, Y, Z. You have a choice now. You can either share the PlayStation with your sibling, or that means no PlayStation for you for the rest of the week. So you're still giving the child a choice, but the choice is through them complying with a family value, or there's a consequence.
It's taking me back to what you said earlier about boundaries and compassion. So as much as it feels for me slightly discomforting, the idea of imposing some kind of disciplinarian action that is borderline punishment, it's really trying to build something for the future so that they would be more appreciative of what happens later on. So it just takes me back to what you said earlier.
That's it. You're actually equipping them with skills for the future by getting them to see that it cannot always be their way.
Yeah.
It cannot always be what they want.
Very
It
true.
cannot be I, me, because at the moment it is leaning in that direction
It
with,
is. Yes, it is.
these social media platforms, and everything is about what I like and who I
Instant
am.
gratification.
You know, that
and-
instant gratification.
And entitlements.
That
There's a lot.
entitlement that is,
Yeah.
you know, the breeding ground here for narcissism, where we are just allowing kids to do whatever it is they want because we want kids to like us.
That's so
and I go back
true.
to that because we want to win the Parent of the Year award,
is
and we
so
want,
true.
you know, we want our kids to, you know, favor us in some way. And that's where you need to go back and start working through your own stuff, because the more you work through your own stuff as a parent, the less validation you're going to need in those times from your child.
Another great question coming in. We've only got a short amount of time left, so I'm going to try and prioritize questions
Yeah,
here.
of course.
A question or a thought of a concept on the feature of the phone, the smartphone. If my daughter's friend has a smartphone, they're still going to be exposed to content. So we can't necessarily... I mean, what the point they're making is vaccination teaching them to step away from bad content preferred over insulating or isolating them from, you know, trying to keep them away from everything that's not appropriate? What's that balance there? That's an interesting question.
And I would say that even if there wasn't a smartphone, if your child was just on the playground with another peer and they were discussing something, your child would still be exposed to that thing,
The viewpoint.
Right.
that
opinion.
viewpoint,
Yes,
that opinion. And so I really like that that discernment between the two, and just thinking about, you know, when do I need to get my child to actually stand up for themselves and say that I enjoy playing with you and I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
Or I enjoy playing with you and I don't feel comfortable watching that.
I mean, it's generally something my 9-year-old girl struggles with. And it also connects to another question. Thank you for so many great questions today, by the way. How do we make sure that kindness and empathy does not reflect as softness or weakness, vulnerability, enabling other children to take advantage and bully?
Yeah.
So that kind of connects to what we were just saying there.
Yeah. I think it really comes down to your values again. It comes down to understanding that you can still be kind and set a boundary with someone. You
Right.
can still be kind and say to someone that I don't feel comfortable doing that. And to all the people pleasers out there, I'm a recovering people pleaser, by the way, so you're not alone.
I think many
recovery.
are. Yes.
You
yeah.
know, I think it's about understanding that we need to learn default responses, because it's something that many of us were not taught. We didn't have a subject on it at school.
Yeah.
I wish we did, and I didn't learn about the different clouds in the sky. I think it would have taken me a lot further today. You know? I still don't know if it's going to rain or not
Stratus,
later.
Cumulus, no good with emotions, but I
so
can
I
tell you
mean,
what
like,
kind of cloud that is.
Yeah, it really would have
Yeah.
helped to know how to navigate those difficult conversations. And this is a lot of the work that I do with adults in therapy is setting boundaries, pushing back, saying no, but still being kind, still being clear,
Yeah.
still being respectful. We can be both.
I want to make time for this question. And this feels like another question we could do a whole hour on. Can we have some valuable insights for parents with special kids who, and they say can understand emotions and interpret the environment, but I actually think they possibly mean can't interpret emotions, because we are living in an increasingly neurodiverse generation.
Yes.
There's so many people
Yes.
my age
Yeah.
being diagnosed as neurodiverse.
Yes.
But advice for parents whose children are perhaps struggling to interpret what's happening around them.
I think having that one-on-one time with the child, having very concrete, practical examples that you can share with the child, getting out a book that has those themes that the child may have just faced at school, that they can actually just see that this character in this book experienced X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it is about teaching these children the feelings, not automatically, but manually, where they are actually learning that this is what feeling sad feels like. This is what feeling angry feels like. And so building that emotional vocabulary through a feelings wheel, through sharing different books with them, through board games, through different platforms that you can then get the child to see that this is what they may be feeling. Even having a feelings chart up on the fridge at home and having different bottle top colored indicators for each family member, and some press stick that you can move the bottle top around, and the child can then share that this is what they're feeling today, or that's what they're feeling today. So very concrete examples can go a long way.
With the remaining time, I'm conscious of the fact, I think we've kind of focused on almost younger children. I think we focus on that 5 to 10 year olds. And I've been through this with my older boys, but teenagers, tweenagers and teenagers, any practical advice? I mean, I know all of us have had, as hormones kick in, as, the internet takes hold or social media takes, practical tips or advice for parents of teenagers, because that's when they start I don't want it to happen with my daughter, but they will start pulling away from us as well.
Remembering that your teen may need independence, but they also still need connection. And so relating to teens will look a bit different. It's not about talking to them face to face. It's about doing something with them side by side. So forget about the face to face. Look at the side by side things that we can do with our teens to still build on that connection. It may be driving together in the car, listening to their favorite tunes. It may be walking on the beach with them. It may be cooking something in the kitchen together. So I'm not sitting opposite you saying to you, how was your day and how are you feeling? Because they're not interested. But allowing them to teach you something, stepping into their world, connecting with them from their frame of reference. If they love playing Minecraft, let them teach you how to play Minecraft. So it is really about finding out what activities they enjoy doing and leaning into their world and, finding those ways to connect with them, and also remembering that it takes a village to raise a kid and that you are not the only person that needs to be there and have those conversations with your child. They may feel more comfortable having that conversation with an uncle or an aunt.
That's true.
Or a sports coach or a therapist or a school counselor. And allowing that space for your child to have those other relationships, understanding the importance of having other adult figures in their life that can influence them in positive ways.
Because that's an interesting challenge for a lot of people here, isn't it? Because we've got so many expats where the grandparents and the uncles are in a different country.
Or even not even around, you know, like, unfortunately. But it's very interesting what you said, because that goes back to not necessarily having to be favored all the time, but respecting that, you know, they care for you, they love you, but, you know, you also need to allow them to have their own breathing space and their own place to thrive.
I'm very going to quickly get one more question for the audience before I have to unfortunately bring this conversation that could carry on for hours. My second son, boy, he's 8.5-year-old, and he's still madly jealous of his younger brother, 5-year-old, despite our multiple tries to make him feel special. So I feel like that was a request for some advice there specific.
Yes.
Any quick closing thoughts on that?
Firstly, I would say validate the child's feelings and to be able to say, I can see you feeling jealous right now. What might be making you feel this way? And also to understand that when we look at jealousy and envy, the underlying cause can often be that they are not feeling safe in their relationship with someone, or they are not feeling empowered in that area of their life. So when we can understand that there's something that is underlying this and that there can be a deep-seated insecurity, and we start working with that, it can go a long way. And so it may mean building in one-on-one time with your child when the 5-year-old isn't present, because they've had 3.5 years without that sibling in their life. And now all of a sudden that sibling is here. And so carving out that one-on-one time with that child, going and doing something that they enjoy, finding out the things that they're good at, building on that with them can really go a long way.
As I say, this conversation can go on for hours. And I'm so sorry, guys, we actually have to bring things to an end. Christine Kritzas, thank you so much for joining us on Connect for Health. And thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your questions. Thanks for getting so engaged in the polls. Remember, again, I'm going to say this every time, this is an exclusively live for Cigna Healthcare members. So if you want to get in and ask questions like our audience have today, reach out to Cigna Healthcare for benefit. Otherwise, please you'll search for Connect for Health on YouTube or on your podcast channel. Help subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Please remember to check out our previous episode with three-time Olympian Sarah Lindsay, talking about fitness and mobility. Fantastic episode. And also, once this comes to an end, you'll be given the opportunity to give us feedback. We'd love that. So it means that help us help you. But once again, from Connect for Health, thank you so much. Brilliant conversation.
Thank you,
guys.
Christine. That was lovely.
See you next time.